Well, for those watching this, my name's Mickey, and I'm working with my friend Marcel, or Lessons with Marcel, and we're going to do an interview with a good friend of mine who I've known for many years. We go way back. He's the editor-in-chief of the famous Flatpicking guitar magazine, and currently is the editor-in-chief of the famous Bluegrass Unlimited. So, to my knowledge, Dan is one of the most prolific purveyors of teaching flatpicking music, perhaps of all time. When I mentioned to Marcel that I thought he should interview you, he goes, "Why don't you do it? You know Dan, you're friends with Dan, why don't you do the interview?" And it's a real honor to welcome Dan to this interview. Hey, Dan, how's it going, man?
Pretty good. How's it going with you, Mickey?
It's going really well. It's good to see you, man. So I'd like to start from the going back to the beginning for you, because a lot of people might know you as the editor of Flatpicking magazine or Bluegrass Unlimited, but how did Dan Miller get into playing music? Was it bluegrass originally? How did this all happen for you?
No, I went to college at the Naval Academy in Annapolis, Maryland, and I didn't play music at all when I was growing up. I was really involved in sports and things like that, but I hadn't learned music. I loved music. I listened to a lot of music. At the Naval Academy, it was very restrictive as far as your freedom and your ability to go out and do things in the evenings. Your first year is very intense, and you have classes 6 days a week, and you do homework every night. The second year, you don't have Saturday classes, but you're not allowed to leave the grounds on Friday night. And so a lot of guys in my class would play music, and there's this one guy, and he was not as good as the rest of the guys, and I sort of cornered him, and I said, "Hey, that looks fun playing guitar. Is it really very hard to learn?" He said, "No, I'll show you some stuff." So he showed me some chords, and I borrowed a guitar from somebody, and I started that way playing, Crosby, Stills and Nash and James Taylor and Jimmy Buffett and that kind of stuff when I was in college.
So it was definitely guitar was your first instrument.
Yeah, and I loved bluegrass. One of the first albums I got when I was in high school was the Flat and Scruggs Foggy Mountain Banjo record, and I just loved the banjo, but I just thought banjo's too hard. So I learned guitar, and then when I graduated college, I wanted to learn how to play bluegrass guitar. And so I went to a music store and said, "Hey, I want to take bluegrass guitar lessons." The store I happened to go to said, "Well, we don't have somebody that teaches bluegrass guitar, but we have a guy that teaches bluegrass banjo." And I said, "Well, I don't know. I don't have a banjo." And they said, "Well, we'll rent you one." When I started playing banjo, I got really into bluegrass. Again, I was stationed in Quantico, Virginia, and my parents lived in Springfield, Virginia, which was just 10 miles door to door from the Birchmere in Alexandria, Virginia, where all the bands played. And I went and saw everybody: Johnson Mountain Boys and J.D. Crowe and Hot Rise and Tony Rice and Doc Watson and Norman Blake. I just went and saw everybody play. The first time I went to see Hot Rise, I had Pete Wernick's book, his banjo books. I want to go see this guy play. I'm learning from his book, And at the Birchmere, the stage is there and you sit at a table and you don't know who's going to be where. So I thought, well, I want to sit in front of this banjo player. I'll guess that he's going to be at this mic. And I ended up sitting right in front of Charles Sawtelle and just got blown away by his guitar playing. Man, I want to learn how to do that. But I didn't really start flatpicking until years later. I was still playing rhythm guitar and just playing banjo until right before I started Flatpicking Guitar Magazine, really. I started learning how to flatpick from a Steve Kaufman book.
Really?
Yeah, and
how cool.
I had a publishing company. I was publishing martial arts books in a martial arts magazine when I got out of the Marine Corps in 1992. I was in the Marine Corps from 1982 to 1992. And in about 1995, 96, I started to learn how to flatpick, 1995. When I started to learn how to flatpick, I thought, man, there's no magazine out there like Banjo Newsletter for flatpickers.
It's surprising, right? Because there's more guitar players than banjo players.
Yeah, and so I said, well, I have a publishing company. I'll just start one. And so in 1996, I started publishing Flatpicking Guitar Magazine. And what I did in early 96, I wrote letters to all of the people that I knew that were guitar instructors that had instructional material. Steve Kaufman and Brad Davis and Orrin Starr and Dix Bruce and Adam Granger and all these guys that had done instructional books. And I said, hey, I'm thinking about starting this magazine. Would you guys be interested in contributing? And a lot of people that I floated this idea by would say, well, after you talk about Tony, Doc, and Norman, and Dan Crary, and Clarence, who are you going to talk about? I said, Banjo Newsletter has been coming out every month since 1975, and they're still finding people to talk about. And there, like you said, there's more guitar players than there are banjo players. So I felt like I could do it, I got enough of these guys that said they'd be contributors to the magazine. And so in November of 1996, we came out with our first issue, and Steve Kaufman was on the cover.
You just went to one of my questions, was how did you decide who went on the cover?
Of course, you think about Tony and Doc and Norman and Dan Crary and those guys, but I wanted to prove myself to Tony, Doc, and Norman and those guys that it was not going to be some fly-by-night thing. And I wanted to have several issues out so that those guys could see them and see it was a quality product. And, before I approached them, I wanted to have some established credibility.
For sure. How did you get so well-versed in reading and writing to be able to write all these tablatures and do the notation aspect? A lot of bluegrass players don't read at all.
I didn't either until I started the magazine.
Wow.
I started to learn how to read when I bought Finale and had to do tabs for the magazine. I mean, I had written banjo tabs for years, but not standard notation. I didn't know how to read standard notation when I started the magazine.
That's incredible. So when you learned to play bluegrass banjo and flatpick, you were doing it more the by ear methods.
A tab.
Sure.
But I didn't read the dots. I read the tab.
So you taught yourself to read and write music.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it was just a necessity because, all of the tablature software that was out at the time, you had to enter the dots in the computer. So I had to of course, I was really slow at it at the beginning, but after doing it for 20 years, I got faster at it.
How important would you say reading and writing music is to learning to play a genre like bluegrass or flatpick guitar?
I don't think it's important at all to be able to read or write. It just to play. If you want to be a studio guy, maybe. If you want to be a teacher, maybe. If you want to write out some tablature, it may be helpful to your students. But I'm a real proponent of learning by ear. I think tab has its place, but I think learning by ear is going to do people a service to take the time and effort. It's more of a struggle, more frustrating at the beginning to learn by ear. But if you can take the time to develop that skill, it's definitely well worth it, I think.
For sure. And I'd imagine the founding fathers of bluegrass were probably not the most avid music readers. They were probably more of the oral tradition.
No, I don't know any of them that read, really.
Right. People like Tony and Vassar, they were ear players.
Yeah. And Doc, obviously.
Out of the a lot of guitar players that there's two that come to mind that I know that you play music with and jam with. And how did you start your connection with the great Tim May and the great Brad Davis, two guys that I associate you with?
Yeah, well, Brad and I became friends. I asked him, he had some books out on flatpicking that was through Dan Huckabee's company. And so I approached him early on before I even started the magazine about being a contributor. Brad and I just hit it off right away as good friends from the start of the magazine. And then when we started producing a CD with every issue of the magazine, it was before Pro Tools and all that stuff. He'd been an engineer back in the days of, when you recorded to tape and you spliced it by cutting it with X-Acto. Wow. At the time that we decided to put a CD out with every issue of the magazine, Brad had this little digital Roland unit that he was working on.
I remember those.
And so I would drive to Brad's house in Nashville every other month, and we'd spend the weekend putting the CD together. And then when I started the record label, Brad's first solo CD came out on FGM Records. I said, Brad, let's go do some shows so we can promote this record. And he said, well, why don't you play with me, And so I started playing with him. At first I was playing guitar and mandolin and banjo and whatever the song called for. And then he said, hey, it'd be cool if you just played bass. I just need that bass there. And so I said, okay, so we started touring together, him playing guitar and me playing bass. And then in 2005, we were all teaching at Bull Harmon's St. Louis Flatpick weekend. And Tim May was there. And Brad and I had been touring and doing shows together for a while. The instructors do a show on Saturday night or whatever during the weekend. And Brad said, Tim, why don't you just come up with us and we'll do a trio thing. And so we rehearsed some stuff and we went out and played. It was a lot of fun. And we just said, man, let's do more of this. We started touring as a 3-piece band, coffee houses and clubs and house concerts as a 3-piece. And then when we did festivals, John Moore would join us and Tim's wife, Gretchen. So for festivals, we were a 5-piece. And we did an album together and all that stuff. So we just became good friends over the years. And when I had this idea for the Flatpicking Essentials course, I called Tim and Brad. Tim and Brad both. We've done books together. So we would just be on the road touring and playing gigs and doing workshops. And then when we're in the hotel rooms, we'd be working on these books. And so we came up with all these book ideas over the years to put out. So that's how that all came together.
You just mentioned the Flatpicking Essentials course. A lot of my students have those materials. And they mention those materials as something they've learned from. It's super has a lot of information in there, and it has a ton of stuff to go through. That was your idea to do that Essentials course?
Yeah, and the reason is because a lot of the feedback I was getting from flat-picking guitar players was, I've learned 25, 30 tunes from tabs, and that was sort of the way the most people learned, is they would just get a fiddle tune book or some tab book and memorize tabs. And they didn't know how to create their own solos. They didn't know how to improvise. They just learned that all they could do was play the tab they memorized at the jam.
Yeah.
They couldn't really participate on songs they'd not memorized or played before. This is the struggle, the road that I had traveled as well, because when I first started learning banjo, I would just memorize tabs, and I was in that place as well. What I thought is a lot of people are missing foundational stuff. They think that improvisation is something that you don't learn until you're advanced.
Right.
The way I teach now is I have private students. I start teaching how to improvise from day one. I teach them how to read tabs to get some repertoire going. I teach them how to learn by ear. And I also, part of their process from the beginning is learning how to improvise, because I think that if you wait, if you say, well, I'm not ready for improvisation, I'm just going to memorize all these tunes, when you finally think you're ready to improvise, you're so far behind your tab reading skills that you're going to get frustrated. You're just going to keep falling back on tabs. I think it's easy to learn how to improvise if you start early.
There's an interview I saw with it was actually Brian Sutton being interviewed by Marcel. And he says, if you just add one little slide, one little hammer-on, just add one little thing, you're already making the song your own. Even by adding one note or one little ornamentation, it's already different than what is on the page.
Well, people are afraid that they're not going to get it right, that they're going to make a mistake, and so they're really scared to improvise.
Sure.
They're really scared to fly without a net. One of the questions I always had asked guitar players that I'd interview is about improvisation, because improvisation in general fascinates me in martial arts or music or whatever. Dan Crary said the guys that are the best at improvising are the ones that aren't afraid to improvise. You just got to do it and not be afraid that you're going to mess up. And if you mess up, don't make a big deal of it. When I interviewed David Rawlings, he said, when I mess up on stage, I just laugh about it. And the audience just laughs with me.
So you did Flatpicking magazine, correct me if I'm wrong, for 20 years, right?
Yeah.
20 years, and I've been fortunate enough to be a part of it for almost, I'd say like the last 12 or 13 years of that.
Yeah, I
got a
think
chance.
since 2008, right?
Yeah, 2008-ish, and we you stopped it maybe about, what was it now, 5 years ago now, maybe.
2016, end of 2016.
And it was super great to get hooked up with you and work with that magazine. And I remember when you told me that you were closing up shop. It was really sad, but understandable, because the world, it's just, you have a lot of hobbies and a lot of interests, and there's only so long you can keep something going for. Out of the all the years that you've been interviewing guitarists, how approximately, or you might know exactly, how many guitarists have you actually interviewed over the years?
I'd say in the like 300 range.
Incredible. 300 guitar interviews.
We put out 120 issues of Flatpicking guitar, and I interviewed at least 1, 2, or 3 people for every issue. And then I've done lots of podcasts and other things. So yeah, there's probably in the range of 300.
I would imagine, if a lot of people would think the answer would unquestionably be Tony Rice himself, but out of those hundreds of interviews, is there one that sticks out as the one that was the most honor to take part in, or most surprisingly interesting to be a part of?
It was interesting because Doc hated interviews. He didn't give very many interviews. And so what I did is I did as much research as I possibly could on the guy. I read every magazine article, I read everything, and I wrote an article about him just based on that. I read the whole article into a cassette tape and sent it to him. And I said, Doc, could you listen to this and call me back if I got anything wrong? And so after he listened to the whole thing, he called me, and then I did an interview.
That is very, very cool, and such an honor to get a chance to do that, to work intimately with someone like Doc.
Yeah, I mean, and it was always great interviewing Tony, and just guys that had been doing it for a long time, but guys that were deep thinkers about it. That really had studied it deeply and thought about it and could articulate it very well. Those guys are always interesting to interview. And I'll tell you what, one of the questions I always ask people that have been playing for a lifetime, I'd say, how has your playing changed over the years from the time you were a young guy and to now? And almost every one of them said something along the lines of, I play less notes and I try to make every note mean something.
Yeah, that's exactly what I would say. That's exactly, that is.
You've got wisdom beyond your years then.
Yeah, that comes when the gray hairs start popping up. You start playing, the gray hairs and playing less notes go hand in hand. Mm-hmm. So you were like, hey, I'm getting out of the magazine business. I've done this for 20 years. You did all the special issues. You did the Celtic issue, the old time issue, the waltz issue, all that stuff. So much cool stuff over the years. And it's like, all right, I'm done with this. And then you got approached to do to be the editor-in-chief of Bluegrass Unlimited. What was your original when someone asked you that? Were you like, absolutely, or were you like, definitely not? Like, how did you take that?
Chris Joslin, he called me in the summer, and he is the executive director of the Bluegrass Music Hall of Fame and Museum in Owensboro, Kentucky. And he said, Dan, Kitsy Kuykendall, who was Pete Kuykendall's wife, called Chris and said, would the museum be interested in acquiring Bluegrass Unlimited magazine? Because Pete Kuykendall had passed away in 2017. Kitsy and the staff ran it for a couple of years, and then COVID hit, and they were having trouble surviving because the festival ads stopped, and so Chris thought it would be a good idea to keep it going, and so he called me and asked if I'd be interested in being the editor. I had subscribed to that magazine since 1980, and I knew Pete Kuykendall, and I thought, man, we can't let this go. We can't let this magazine die. It's been in publishing since 1966. The advantage here for me was that Flatpicking Guitar Magazine was all me. All the financial responsibilities for that was on me, and the paper prices were going up and mailing prices were going up, and I had to do all the layout. I had to do all the tabs. I had to do everything because I couldn't afford to pay other people to do anything. The funnest part for me of Flatpicking guitar was the part where I got to interview people and I got to decide who got featured and all that. And so with Bluegrass Unlimited, that's all I do now, is that stuff that's I like to do.
Right, that does free up your job for the magazine, and probably I can see why you would enjoy that part of it.
Yeah, and so It's just a part-time job for me. I do other things. I teach lessons and I have a farm that I run. I have other things. We keep the flat picking stuff going. So it's just a part-time job.
Is it nice to have a whole world of bluegrass now available to feature and not just guitarist? You can.
Yeah, because I play every bluegrass instrument except for fiddle. It's fun for me to be able to interview dobro players and banjo players and mandolin players, and
which cool. After 20 years of doing the guitar, that's probably super interesting for you.
Yeah, and I also get to interview my bluegrass heroes that aren't necessarily guitar players.
Yeah.
Jesse McReynolds sending me letters and stuff. It's like, oh, how cool is that?
Incredible. I've noticed that you can't help, even though this publication is different than Flatpicking in the sense that it's all articles and there's no sheet music like there was in Flatpicking, but I can't help but notice you're still really into the educational. You can't help but be into the educational side.
Well, that's kind of my thing, and I feel like more than any other genre of music, bluegrass fans are also players.
Right.
And so I thought we need to have an instructional content. When I met with Chris Joslin and Jason Tanner, who's the publisher, I said, we need to add some things that they didn't have before. We need to get more of a web presence. We need to do some instruction in some way, shape, or form. I don't think we should go to having tabs in the magazine, but I do think we should have some kind of instructional component. So every week we put out a new instruction video. Every week we put out a jamming, backup tracks video. I started a column in the magazine called Learning to Play, and we featured you in one of those. And so I felt like, we need to address this big component of bluegrass because bluegrass people like to play the music. So let's cater to that as well, and not just cater to the people that are fans, but cater to the people that are playing, and the people that aren't playing, let's encourage them to play,
Do you think the technology of internet, YouTube, the whole explosion of social media, is this in the longer run going to be a positive addition for the music, or is it just kind of is it too much, like printing too many baseball cards, lowering the value when there's just too much of something? Do you feel that's a possibility, or it's just maybe? I myself I could probably go either way. Sometimes it seems like this is the best way to share material, but sometimes it just seems overwhelming that there's just too much. Going back to the beginning of the interview, when I had that DVD of Wyatt Rice and David Greer playing, and I think Kenny Smith was on that too, and it was just so unique to have something like that. You couldn't find that in other places, and now there's just endless material. TikTok and Facebook and YouTube. Anyone in their bedroom can just pick a tune and put it on YouTube. There's so much of it. Is this a good thing, or does it water it down a little bit?
Like anything, there's good and bad aspects of it. I teach private lessons, and when people come into me to learn, and they've only learned from like YouTube or whatever, they just are missing a lot. There's real value in private kind of lessons. Now you could do that on, the internet's available for Skype, and got these things where you can send the teachers videos of yourself playing. But in some ways I feel like that one-on-one thing, sitting in front of somebody in real life, hearing those instruments played and getting the vibrations of those things, it's like you can't replace live music. There's vibrations, human vibrations and musical vibrations, and that are going on that you're not going to get over a computer. I think there's value in it all. I think the biggest downside of having so much material available is if you're a beginner, it's hard to discern what is valuable and what's not.
Almost overwhelming.
And if you're just flipping through YouTube, it's real hit or miss. You might hit some great video and you might hit something that's not that great, and it's going to lead you in a bad direction, or you're not going to be able to interpret it the right way, and you're going to get a bad habit. And as well as I do, if you get a bad habit, it's really twice as much work to correct it. You know what I mean?
I do. I agree. I stay super busy with lessons myself, and I recently asked my friend Catherine, who sings with Belle in the band, I can't believe people keep coming to me. There's all this free information online. And she's like, well, there's too much. The students, the beginners, it's hard to even decide how do you take all this information? There's too much of it, and decide where to even begin, what direction to go in. and someone like you or me can actually take the student and point them in the right direction.
Yeah, or see when they're getting off track, or see, correct certain things that are subtle that are harder to deal with.
That's right. You really can't. I would agree with that. I'll bet even my friend Marcel would agree with that, and he does his whole thing as the YouTube channel. But he would agree that you can't substitute the in-person one-on-one.
I used to tell people that you shouldn't learn from tablature, but I made my living printing tablature, so
That's exactly right. It's a super honor to get a chance to do this. I've been wanting to do this with you for a long time, and I mentioned it to Marcel a while back. My short list of people to interview, and you were one of the people on the list. We got to get Dan Miller, and I don't think that people like I would be doing what I'm doing. People like myself and Marcel, I don't think we would understand a lot of what we're doing if it wasn't for what you've done. Sometimes I forget how much I've actually learned from your material, and going back through the years, thinking of like not only the performance DVDs, but the Wyatt Rice rhythm guitar video changed my life. Not to mention just the miles of tablatures and songs that I used to get in the magazine and learn from that, and information, interviews. You've introduced so many people to a world of music, and a whole world of people to a whole world of music. I couldn't be more grateful. So everyone has the Google, of course, but just to put it out there, Dan, how can people these days find what you're doing? How do they find the Bluegrass Unlimited podcasts, or the back issues, or your Essential Elements courses? How do people find that?
Well, go to flatpick.com, flatpick.com, and you can find all the stuff I ever did: magazines, videos, CDs, books, back issues, all that stuff is there. And then bluegrassunlimited.com, and you can get our weekly lessons, you can get our weekly podcasts, you can get the weekly jam tracks. And for flat pickers, I dug into my interview archives. I have all these interviews I did over the years on cassette tapes, and I got a little thing, a little device that allowed me to digitize all those cassettes. I put 2 podcasts out where I interviewed Charles Sawtelle, and I had 2 interviews with Jimmy Martin and 1 with Tony Rice. And then we did a podcast for Flatpicking Guitar Magazine. We did 60 of them, and they're all still on flatpick.com. Go to flatpick.com podcast, and you can still listen to those that were done, all those years ago. They're still up there.
I think you and I did one years ago.
I think we probably did one.
They're so great for road trips. Just pop in.
Interesting thing is, of the 84 podcasts I've done so far for Bluegrass Unlimited, the 2 that have had the most downloads so far are Brian Sutton and Larry Sparks, 2 guitar players. So that's kind of cool. These days is, 2 of the biggest people from bluegrass that are out there touring and traveling are Billy Strings and Molly Tuttle, and they're flat pickers,
Right.
So, 2 of the biggest names in bluegrass right now that are drawing the biggest crowds are 2 flat pickers that, we interviewed Molly when she was like 13. I did a podcast with Molly and her dad when she was like 15 years old. And then when she was featured in the magazine the first time, she was like 15 or 16. Sarah Hull was like 15, So it's kind of cool looking back. We did I think Billy Strings was probably 16, 17, 18, somewhere in there when I did the article about him. So it's kind of cool.
It is super interesting to see where it goes. I can't believe we spent the whole hour talking and Billy and Molly didn't come up until here at the end, because they certainly are the top of the heap these days. Dan, it's been a true honor to do this, and I hope we get a chance to do it again. And hopefully for you folks watching, it demystifies the man behind the Flat Picking Essentials course, the man behind the 20 years of Flat Picking magazine, the man playing bass. You look up Tim May and Brad Davis, and you see the guy playing bass behind there. That's my man, Dan Miller, holding the whole thing down on the bass. Hopefully we get a chance to do this again sometime. Maybe to kind of bridge the generational gap also between the inventor of Flat Picking magazine and someone like Marcel, who is one of the inventors of the Bluegrass YouTube channel. He was one of the first guys to put together the YouTube channel package. And it's really great to get you to be a part of it.
Yeah, that's the new thing. My thing was print media,
Right.
Now it's, I'm an old guy and it's video. The thing that's funny now is like Marcel will be interviewed by the guy that's doing holographic, holographic lessons,
Exactly. This is the guy who did the first YouTube channel. And now we beam each other from lesson to lesson.
What's YouTube?